Thank you very much. First of all, Biosergen is a Swedish company and we are listed on Nasdaq First North in Stockholm. As said, I'm Danish, so I think you will prefer me speaking English, so I'll continue doing that. Biosergen addresses one of the worst unmet medical needs, and that is invasive fungal infection. When we think about fungal infections, we think about athlete's foot, some nail condition, dog itch, but invasive fungal infection is in a completely different ballgame. You can actually die from invasive fungal infection. Fungal infections or invasive fungal infections are actually increasing in the world because of a growing population, elder population. It is also growing because of the use of antifungals, which are inhibiting. So we're using antifungals in agriculture and everywhere, and that actually can end up in resistance to treatment. The largest indications of invasive fungal infections is Candida, Aspergillus, and cryptococcus. And this space actually, at the moment, with the pressure on more illnesses, more infections, and actually more fungal strains are becoming pathogenic. And the interesting thing is that the space is not developing compounds is not very crowded. So that is one of the reasons the pressure is growing. How do invasive fungal infection rise? We are all exposed to fungi, but normal, healthy people can fight the fungus and will not be affected greatly. But anyone can have a severe illness. We can get cancer. We can have a transplant. We can have diabetes or HIV. And all that kind of people, they are having a weakened immune system, and this gives room for the fungus to develop into an invasive fungal infection. And the result is often, sometimes, that the patient will die, not from the initial illness, but from the fungal infection. And drug resistance is a growing problem. It is recognized many places in the world, and latest in the US, where Candida auris was diagnosed in a couple of hospitals, and this illness was resistant to any treatment. More than 1.7 billion people die every year by fungal infections. And that was when I started in the company 2 years ago. I was actually pretty surprised because everybody knows that lung cancers are deathly, but fungal infections is close to lung cancer, the death of lung cancer. And fungal infection, the situation is recognized by the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention as a global health threat. So we may not be very aware of it in Europe at the moment, but I'm quite sure that we will be aware of it in some years. The most effective illnesses will be candidiasis, aspergillus, cryptococcus, and pneumocystis, and that is 750 estimated a year, more than 300,000, more than 200,000, more than 500,000. And the problem treating is that it's difficult to diagnose, resistance is developing, so treatment may not help, and there is one drug on the market right now that may treat most of fungal infections, but the problem is that it is toxic to the kidney. So a lot of patients cannot be treated with that compound for a long time. So the challenge in diagnosing is that there is this increase in pathogenic fungi. So physicians may not know the new fungi that are pathogenic. There is an increase in the frequency and the severity of the fungal infections. And early diagnostics is very, very important, because a patient coming into a hospital with an invasive fungal infection could actually be dead after 2 days. Current diagnostic methods, they are not necessarily sensitive enough to figure out what fungi is it. The specificity is not good enough, and often, or some places in the world, it's difficult to get hold of these diagnostics. And some of the current diagnostics, they take too long to figure out what fungi is it, so the patient could actually die before we know what kind of fungus it is. Most treatment, as said, will inhibit, not kill the fungus, but just inhibit. And sometimes the treatment doesn't help any longer, so then you need to find a new one. And the drug that could maybe help is killing the kidney, so that drug cannot be used. PST-005 is a unique gene-edited antifungal. It is derived out of nystatin, which is a natural chemical. PST-005 kills the fungus and will not, therefore will not make any drug resistance. The product is safe, it is well tolerated, and there is no genotoxicity, there's no kidney toxicity, which is what we've just shown also in our ended phase 1 trial. The way PST-005 is working is that it binds to something called ergosterol in the fungal cell and creates a hole, a leak in the cell membrane, so the cell will die. Ergosterol is only found in fungal cells, not in human cells, so it doesn't do any harm to humans. Looking at the different drugs on the market, the different classes, is that the polyenes, which PST-005 is part of, they will kill the fungus. The azoles and the echinocandins, they are inhibiting. And what we can also see is that as the azoles and the echinocandins, they are not very broad-spectred. And that is PST-005 and amphotericin B, they are broad-spectred. So when a patient comes into the hospital and they're trying to diagnose, sometimes they can figure out what kind of drug should we give that person, and maybe that treatment will last through the whole treatment, but sometimes it doesn't. And often it's very difficult to figure out what kind of fungal strain is it, what kind of treatment should we give. Today, amphotericin B is a last resort because every physician will try and treat with an azole or quincandin because of the kidney toxicity. But when that doesn't work, then they will maybe try and give amphotericin B. And I have heard in one clinic they have told that around 40% of patients being treated with amphotericin B, they need to stop that treatment because of the kidney toxicity. So with that story told, with no kidney toxicity in BST-005, I think we have a good case if we can follow that through. We have looked in the laboratory and tried to compare BST and ambisome against candidiasis and against Aspergillus. And what we can see is that BST-005 is much more potent than the other drug. Then we have tried to treat mice with an 8 times lower doses than ambisome. And what we see there is that BST-005 is actually working as good as ambisome, even with an 8 times lower dose. What we also looked at in the laboratory was the kidney toxicity. And what we can see here is that amphotericin B will actually be more and more kidney toxic with higher doses, where BST-005 is not kidney toxic. And as I said, we have just finished our phase 1 trial, which was run in Australia with 36 healthy volunteers. And in that study, we saw exactly the same as here. We have no kidney toxicity. It was well tolerated and safe. So both in the laboratory and in real life, we can show the same. As a company, we're focusing on life-threatening, difficult to treat, and resistant invasive fungal infections. We are developing a safe, novel, new polyene. It has fungicidal effect and good safety, and the compound can be used to avoid resistance development. And the compound we have at the moment is an IV drug. And we are developing also an oral and a long-targeted formulation. So that will be a pill easier to administer. You don't need to be in the hospital necessarily. So with BST-005 having that profile, we believe that we can develop BST-005 into a new first-line treatment. Because if you're in doubt what kind of fungus it is we should treat, and you are certain that we will not harm the kidney, why not go directly to a compound that kills the fungus, do not create resistance. So we believe that we will be a first-line treatment. We also see ourselves as emerging as one of the leading companies, because at the moment, if what we see right now is folding out, then we believe that we'll be one of the leading companies within fungal infections. In the future, we also expect that we will build our own commercial infrastructure, not worldwide, but Europe, US, because it's it's not a complex and it's not a big area. It's easy it doesn't need a very big sales organization to do this. So we're a drug development company. We are a very small company. We're actually only 4 people in the company. So we are using educational institutions, laboratories helping us to do the research. We have had public grants from Norway, and we are still trying to get grants from EU and Norway as well. Why I'm saying Norway is that the company originally came out of Norway and the Norwegian universities. The global fungal drug market is around $16 billion US. And of course, we are in this group with 1.6 billion US dollars, but having the profile, the safety and non-kidney toxicity, then we believe that we can also go into these areas and have sales there. So we actually think that our market will be the 16 billion US dollar and not only the 1.6 billion dollars. The annual growth market is more than 6% in all areas. We have a strong patent protection, and of course we are still looking into patents. Should we file new patents? Where should we have patents? So this is an area we are constantly focusing on. We just finished our phase 1 trial. As said, we are very happy with the result. We showed what we expected and hoped for: non-kidney toxicity, safety, and well tolerated. And now we are working on phase 2 programs. We are sending in a clinical trial application as soon as we have the final reports from our phase 1 trial. And we expect to go into Mucor aspergillus as soon as possible. And we are aiming for patients with a secured diagnosis of invasive aspergillosis. What we need to do in the phase 2 studies is actually to document that the drug will have an efficacy on the illness. And if we show that, then we will have a drug that is very different and differentiated from other drugs in this space. We expect to have the first trial patient recruited in Q3 this year, and we expect to have top-line data from the first patient a year after. In September, we raised 42 million, and that was to start or to finish the phase 1 trial and to start treatment of patients, start phase 2 trials. We have warrants out. They are maturing in August, and if they will be exercised at the maximum price and the maximum number, then we will get additional 38 million in August. What we can see of major inflection point is that we will get the final report from the phase 1 trial. As soon as we have that, then we'll send in the submission for clinical trial in the first phase 2 study, and we'll begin recruiting patients in the study. And as said, in a year we will have top-line data, and at that time, in the meantime, we're developing our nano the oral formulation, long formulation, and we expect to be able to start clinical trials in Q3 24. This is the management. Peter Andersen. Peter Andersen has a history from, for instance, Forward Pharma, which a Danish company that was IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange at $250 US, and he has been in the pharma industry for many, many years. Our COO, Tine, has also a long track record with drug development. And myself, I've been 20 years in biotech and have been in biotech companies and have brought 2 compounds to the market. Our board is with international reputation and clinical and commercial experience. We have Torsten Gersch. Torsten Gersch is from Rosetta, and Matthias Klintemar is from Østersøstiftelsen. They are our largest investors. Marianne Koch and Achim are, and Lena are from the biotech industry. Henrik is also from the biotech industry, but he's on the financial side as I am. And Anna Mette is in the Norwegian life science industry. So that is Biosergen, ending with our shareholders. Østersøstiftelsen, that's 44%. Rosetta is 21%, and the rest is 34%. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if there is so big need for a new drug, why haven't the big pharmaceutical companies made one earlier?
I think Big Pharma doesn't really like this area because the treatment period is quite short, maybe 2 weeks. I think Big Pharma would rather like oncology products, diabetes products, where you treat for longer time, where there's more revenue involved in it.
You said that the result, you have said earlier that the results for phase 1 is the most important result for you. What do you mean by that?
I mean, before we only had laboratory proof that our product would differentiate from other products on the market, being not kidney toxic. Our compound, or the molecule, is more or less the same as the other polyenes. So we have an idea that the efficacy will be the same. But if we could prove that we are not kidney toxic, then there's a huge difference to the other products. So now we have proved it in healthy volunteers that we are not kidney toxic. So that's why we think that's why we believe this is a very important achievement, and it will be possible to develop this product into a first-line treatment.
You also showed that you had other plans for a nano version. What can you tell us more about that? What are the advantages?
I would rather prefer a physician explaining this, but how I understand it is that you can get the drug delivered more precisely at the right place. That's the advantage in the nano encapsulation and delivery.
Oh, so it's more efficient for you to develop a nano version?
You can get the drug delivered in the right place in the lung easier with a nanoformulation. That's my understanding.
So how will it be distributed now from the beginning? Is it within the hospitals, or can you do this?
No, the BC005 as it is at the moment, it is an IV, so that is intravenous infusion, so the patient has to be hospitalized.
Yes.
So you get the treatment in the hospital. But if we are able to develop a pill, then you can have your treatment at home.
Yes. You mentioned some thing about the potential, $1.6 million. That's blockbuster potential, but it can be even bigger than that. What is your plan for it to be bigger? Do you already have plans for that?
Our plans is that you're thinking about selling the product. The idea, the plan we have at the moment is to have our own sales force in Europe and the US, and then the rest of the world we'll try and partner and have partners doing either trials and sales in other areas. So that's the idea of marketing the product.
And you will do the phase 2 by yourselves?
That is the idea, to do the phase 2 trials ourselves, yes.
And then you need a partner for the phase 3?
I say it this way, if it's possible for us to do the phase 3 ourselves, then we may do it, but it is very expensive to do phase 3 trials, so maybe it's more likely to partner phase 3 trials.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Niels. We have to move on then.